vehicles, and we're excited to welcome a panel of presenters from McDOT, MAG, and Valley Metro. But before we get started, we just want to note there is, the session is being recorded, and we ask all attendees to limit their conversation just because we've got a McDOT tied in on WebEx. So to introduce myself, my name is Anita Richardson-Fergia, and I'm president of the WTS Metropolitan Chapter. So we'd like to first thank our sponsors, who you see on the screen here. Without them, we couldn't function as a chapter. I also want to thank our board members. If we have any board members in attendance, would you please stand? And we've got Haley, Estelle also on the line, and Maisha Charity, who have done such a good job. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's some logistics issues with this program, but Haley and Tanisha have really done a fantastic job pulling this together. So the program today is, like I said, is the second part of a two-part series. It features guests from our local agencies who are involved in planning the future of autonomous vehicles in the metropolitan Phoenix area. Today we learn how they are preparing for and have been impacted by AV technology. So joining us today from McDOT is April Wire. April is the ITS project manager at Maricopa Department of Transportation. April and her team are responsible for maintaining and ensuring the traffic signal central system is up to date, works with traffic signal technicians to troubleshoot timing issues, develops, reviews, and implements coordination plans, and oversees traffic engineering on-call consultants. She graduated from the Missouri University of Science and Technology with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And here with us, representing MAG, is Eric Anderson. Eric began doing work as a consultant for MAG in 1983 and was hired in 2000 to lead the MAG Transportation Division. As executive director of MAG, he's been responsible for transportation planning for the region, including implementation of Prop 400, the region's transportation sales tax funding plan. So over his career, his work has focused on regional and urban growth, economic development, and economic impact analysis. He's currently involved in a number of planning and research efforts relating to technology, including autonomous and connected vehicles. He's focused on urban form and social impacts of this new technology and the implications for the regional transportation system. And then finally, we have Carroll Catcher from Valley Metro. Carroll serves as the Deputy Director for Planning and Development at Valley Metro and oversees service planning, scheduling, geographic services, and works on technology projects. Before joining Valley Metro in 2006, Carroll previously worked in various capacities with the Topeka Metropolitan Transit Authority in Topeka, Kansas, and VIA Metropolitan Transit in San Antonio. And she's also worked for 12 years as executive director of the Southwest Transit Association, which is an 8-state regional transit association serving southwestern states, including Arizona. She has a master's degree in urban planning and bachelor's degree in environmental design. Both are from the University of Kansas School of Architecture and Urban Design. So to start out, let's welcome you, Eric Anderson from MAG.
Looks like magic. Haley's in the background. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me here today. I'm not sure I'm the technology expert, but I'll keep talking until I convince you that. So, this quote, Robert Goddard, who was the father of the rockets and space program, really his quote was, "It's difficult to say what's impossible, for the dream of yesterday is the hope of today and the reality of tomorrow." And what it means is we visualize things all the time about, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could do this or that? And lo and behold, it happens. Sometimes it takes decades and centuries, but I think this is a great, the picture on the left is from the 50s, visualizing autonomous vehicles. And lo and behold, we actually have those out of the road today. And so, a good example of visualization and then becoming our reality. I'm going to share with you some other past technological innovations. Go to the next slide. Maybe. Yeah, click it. So this is a safety belt device for cars. Once again, some of the early safety features. Click one more time. I love this one because this is the airbag. This is the early airbag. It actually looks like something from your kitchen. If you look close, it has seams in it and everything. But that is an early airbag concept that people were saying, hey, this is really something that we ought to do. And once again, it took how long? This is probably from the 40s, this picture. So once again, another example. Go to the next one. I love this one. This is an early baby seat. I'm not sure it has safety accreditation, to say the least, but it gave Junior, actually you can see out the windows. But once again, good idea, just bad on implementation. So go to the next one. Maybe not. There we go. So here's the early car phone. Again, this is touted as a drive-in phone. It says drive-in phone at car window level is one of 3 experimental dialers in Chicago, weatherproof and lighted at night. So there you go. So you can just drive up and use it. So once again, early car phone technology. And of course, the next one. People always said we have to figure out how to get cars up in the air. This one actually flies. So once again, this is I think a homemade. Somebody put that together in the garage. But this concept here was actually a little model that I found too that was actually implemented on a scale model. And it had a little rod that goes through that loop in the roof and lifts the car up. Like a monorail. So once again, people are very creative in this. But the next one, if we go to the next slide, is my favorite. This is out of Popular Science magazine, which magazine I used to read as a kid. Came out all the time. And all the latest scientific advancements and all the rest. This is from 1938. And highlighted here, if we go around, so there was a GPS mapping concept in this vehicle. This is 1938, so this is what, almost 80 years ago, something like that.
Wow.
83 years ago. Gives you traffic information too, once again, traveler information systems on board. Lane control and blind spot protection was thought of in 1938 too. The lane control was actually electromagnetic guideway underneath the pavement that kept the car centered. Probably wouldn't work very well, but in fact, those are the kind of concepts. Bus rapid transit. We've got a bus going down the median of the freeway. Once again, people were thinking about how do we implement better transportation modes. Automatic braking. It picked up an infrared on the car ahead of it, and so if it saw that the car ahead was braking, it would apply the brakes in the vehicle. So once again, a lot of the technology that we see today was actually being thought of 80 plus years ago. So once again, there are some new ideas out there, but once again, they're very few because people have been thinking about how do we make our transportation systems better and safer for many years. So go to the next slide. So in talking about technology, I think in terms of the transportation sphere, I kind of think of them in driving systems. That's everything from the assisted driving systems to semi-autonomous vehicles to the Waymo vehicle, which is truly autonomous, level 5. Safety systems, I'm going to spend some time on this because I think the technology that we're seeing implemented on the autonomous vehicle front a real benefit of that is the incorporation of the safety features, and now I'll talk about that a little bit later. Traffic control devices. How do we make not just smart signals, but dynamic signals that can anticipate how traffic is going to behave in the future and modify signal systems? Travel information systems. Once again, how do we give either the vehicle directly or the driver of the vehicle better traveler information in terms of work zones and alternative routing, weather information, those sorts of things. And then system performance data too is something that, from a planning shop perspective is also very important. We spend a lot of money on data, and we're getting closer and closer to having real-time traffic information that we can actually look at in a very granular form. So we go to the next slide. So we break down some of the safety systems in particular. I had another slide, I don't think it made it in the slide deck, showing that the crash and insurance claim reduction due to the implementation of these various technologies is anywhere between 10% reduction to over 50% reduction. And so when we talk about systems like collision warning, forward collision warning signals, hey, you're getting too close, wake up, things like that. Rear cross traffic warning, use it in combination with the cameras now, so you can actually detect when there's cross traffic behind you. Collision intervention, automatic emergency braking, adaptive cruise control systems that we see in new vehicles today. Extremely smart and have great safety implications. Driving control assistance, once again, adaptive cruise control, lane centering, lane keeping assistance to make sure that you don't drift one lane to another. Once again, we're a long ways from having a large penetration of truly autonomous vehicles in the fleet. A few years ago, I was a little bit more optimistic that some of the engineering challenges and technology challenges would be readily solved, but once again, it's the 80-20 issue. I think Waymo's a good example of that. They solved 80-90% of what they need to do, but when you're talking about a mixed fleet with human drivers out there, as well as autonomous systems who are trying to actually follow the rules of the road, unlike the human drivers, it's really difficult because the computers in the cars are saying, hey, I can't do this, and the guy behind me is honking and say, yes, there's enough space there, you can make that left turn. And, so once again, that's why 90+% of the crashes in the United States are caused by some kind of human error or driver error of one type or another. Other systems, I talked about that. So let's go to the next slide. But one of the major challenges we have is the technological uncertainty, and from a planning perspective. So we just finished our update of our long-range plan, and so trying to figure out what our investment strategies need to be between now and 2050 is somewhat challenging, to say the least. What will be the penetration of autonomous vehicles? What kind of technology are we going to be looking at? So we roll back to 1990, 30 years ago today. What kinds of technology were really anticipated that we would be using today? The iPhone came out in 2007. We actually go to the next slide. Pace of change. The iPhone came out in 2007, and they have the iPhone 13 out now, something like that. I guess you can make your own movies with this. That's what the ads tell me. I don't want to do that. I met my wife, and she said, "Oh, I want one of those." And it's, why? But anyway, that's a different story. We'll work on that. But anyway, the pace of technology change is very rapid. And the other thing we're seeing is competing technologies. And so we go to the next slide. One of the more recent ones is the difference between DSRC, short-range communications, which was thought going to be the automobile standard, and that's quickly being replaced now by 5G technology, where we have cell technology in the vehicle communicating to everything. And that's what you're seeing out there now. And in fact, this little chart on the right-hand side, in 2020, there were probably less than 5% of the car brands were deploying 5G technology. It's now up to about 75% in 1 year. So once again, the shift in technology has been very quick, and there have been some costs in terms of supporting DSRC infrastructure in the area, because that was what was thought was going to happen, and it's quickly being now replaced by 5G technology. It's sort of like the beta versus VCR technologies back in the day. If you had a beta recorder, you couldn't use VHS tapes, and VHS won out in that whole competition. So anyway, technology is very tricky to protect, to say the least. So go to the next slide. So a couple of years ago, MAG did produce, in cooperation with the universities here, Smart Region Technologies Report. And this was the time that a lot of talk about smart cities and smart regions, and I kept asking the question of, well, what makes a smart region? What makes a smart city? And I got about 15 different answers. And so we actually had the universities put together this report, which was a summary of what everyone was doing in this space, which was very extensive. And although I think it was done, I think it's dated 2018 or 2019, it's woefully out of date today, once again, because of the pace of technology. Go to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about our emerging technologies field pilots. We started this in 2019. We have 21 either pilot programs that are out in the field today, or in the planning stages, or with negotiations with vendors. So we're funding this with 7 figures of seed money to try to understand kind of what are the real technologies out there. Do they really work like the vendors say they do under real world conditions? And so we're fielding a number of pilots out there. We go, just click a couple more. Another one. And one more. And one more. So, nope. Now we need to back it up to one. That's okay. So what we're doing is, as we field these pilots, working with the technology providers, we have a universities task force on board, including experts from ASU, U of A, and NAU to help us evaluate these technologies. Once again, to do an independent evaluation of how are these really working. And then we're also incorporating a significant amount of funding in the new long-range transportation plan to support emerging technologies in the future. So go to the next slide. So this is a map to show some of the pilots that we have out there now. Categories: traffic control devices, the next generation of real-time traffic control signals, lighting systems, smart lighting systems, travel information systems, crowdsourcing for traffic data out there, smart board zones. We actually have a little shuttle that we're putting together out in Peoria too, so helping support that effort. We go to the next slide. The technologies included in these pilots kind of range from artificial intelligence, use of innovative sensors. We used innovative sensors a couple years ago to really understand where people are coming and going from who use I-10 around the Broadway curve. And so we deployed sensors up and down that corridor, and it gave us good origin and destination, so we knew kind of where people were coming from and going to. And that helped us devise traffic mitigation strategies for the current construction project. So as I-10 has to be shut down for structure, either removal or construction over the freeway, over I-10, gives an idea of where people are coming from and going to, and we could simulate that then in a series of models that we have in place too. And so this particular sensor technology picked your not only your cell phone data, which from your Bluetooth, but also your tire pressure built into your tires, you know, the low pressure light that actually, this technology actually matches the RFI IDs coming off of those tire pressure indicators. So something I didn't even know existed, but once again, it worked pretty well for us. You know, in comparison, we had done a project looking at where traffic was coming from and going to through the Deck Park Tunnel on 7th Street and 7th Avenue area. That project was way over $200,000 and included helicopters hovering and taking photos and having people actually do photo interpretation, tracking vehicles. Extremely expensive, and obviously there's a lot of error in that too. And so this new technology replaced all that completely. So once again, we're very, very happy with it. We go to the next slide. This is the Peoria shuttle, low speed, maybe a different vehicle. This is the Ollie vehicle, which is actually developed by Local Motors here in Arizona. It doesn't have some of the NHTSA safety certification yet, so not sure that we'll be able to use that vehicle. But anyway, more to come on that. Go to the next slide. We're also working with Verizon. This is the 5G technology, looking at how do we connect the vehicles to the infrastructure. And so they're developing a virtual, what they call a virtual roadside unit that can capture data coming off these vehicles and feed that into the different information systems. So once again, this is something that we're about ready to implement here in certain locations. Next slide. This is just some screenshots of some of the evaluation reports. We don't have many of those yet because the pilots are still underway, but I think those are going to be some of the preliminary results. Is not surprisingly, technologies generally work, but not quite to the same level as the vendors are saying they do, especially under real life traffic conditions too, which are always a lot more variable than in some kind of controlled environment. Go to the next slide. So I mentioned traffic data collection. We are tied in now to a company called Wejo, W-E-J-O. They're capturing and compiling data that smart vehicles now are emitting in terms of location, speed, direction, and some other telemetry data. We're capturing about 200,000 vehicles at any snapshot in that, and what it does is gives us, it's very granular, so you can actually figure out where people are slamming on their brakes on the highways and where the bottlenecks are happening on a real-time basis. So once again, it's really a neat data set, and we continue to use that to improve our transportation planning activities. To go to the next slide, just to wrap up here, talk a little bit about our activity-based model. You know, the new term is a digital twin. And I had some consultants approach me a couple years ago to talk about digital twins, and I said, what do you mean a digital twin? She said, well, it's a computer model that captures kind of in digital form what real life is all about. He said, like our transportation models that we spend 7 figures on trying to maintain every year. And they said, yeah, it's kind of like that. So anyway, you know, once again, it's a little bit different take on it, but it's always surprising to me that some consultants think they have the latest and greatest technology, but in fact we've been using it for years. So anyway, but we did simulate, we go to the next slide, 100% AV on the system. So if we had 100% autonomous vehicles in the fleet, these are some of the factors that you can vary. Obviously the TNCs, the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world play a big role in this in terms of transportation as a service. We go to the next slide, which shows the results. Showed a 27% overall increase in VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, on the system. And about 11% of that was kind of the dead ending of the vehicle. So it was repositioning the vehicle where it needed to be, as opposed to carrying passengers or freight or whatever in that vehicle. So once again, This assumes 100% autonomous vehicle penetration of the fleet. Don't think that's going to happen in the next couple decades, but it's certainly something we could see mid-century this year. So I'm going to go to the next slide. I mentioned the plan we put together. Mr. Thomas and John Boland led this effort. They did a great job. Having done this in 2003 and 4 for Prop 400, I know how difficult it is. They just knocked it out of the park. So once again, I can't say enough about the great job they did. $36.8 billion plan. About half of that, about $19 billion of that, is from the proposed extension of the half-cent sales tax. We're proposing continuation of that half-cent for another 25 years versus 20. That extra 5 years gave us a little bit more revenue that we could put in the plan and include the big project that was put in because of that was State Route 30 out in the Buckeye area. So once again, that's in the plan now. Go to the next slide. Just a quick summary of some of the numbers: 367 new freeway lane miles, 186 new HOV lane miles, etc. Highlighted down there, you see emerging technology. We have $310 million programmed, and then $750 million for ITS. So you combine those together in terms of transportation technology. We've got $1 billion sitting there to fund new technology. Once again, my philosophy, quite frankly, is if we can use technology to get more out of what we have today, as opposed to building new things, that's a good thing. It's a lot cheaper to get more out of what you have than having to build new highway capacity or expanding even the bus fleet. It's a lot easier, a lot more cost effective just to get more out of what you have. So that's what I have for you today. Be happy to answer any questions perhaps afterwards. Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much for speaking with us. We will have questions and answer at the end, but now I'd like to hand it over to Carroll Catcher at Valley Metro.
Hello, I guess it's afternoon. I have to say good afternoon. So, technology is wonderful. My home is all about the Google. We have hey Google, do this. Hey, well, I shouldn't say that because somebody's phone is we call it the big G when we don't want it to listen when we're talking about it. But my husband also, he's the chef in our house, and he does most of the cooking, and which is something I love to say at WTS, my husband cooks. But he has wanted for a long time an induction range, and he just texted me this morning, it's on sale, let's get it. And he sent me a picture, and I said, is it easier to keep clean? And he said, yes, because it never heats up. And then he sent me a picture, and he says, and look, there's not even any knobs on it to turn it on. I said, so does Google turn it on for us or what? Technology. So I'm Carroll Catcher, and I am in the planning group at Valley Metro. My slides are up. Okay. In my role in the service planning group, I've had the honor of being directly involved in the Valley Metro conversation about autonomy and how it will affect public transportation. Not only are we talking about this at a very theoretical level, but we've also actually completed an on-the-street pilot program in cooperation with Waymo, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. Next slide. And I wasn't here last month. I don't know what you talked about, so I'm going to go through this really quickly. This is a slide of the levels of autonomy as according to the Society of Automotive Engineers. Just to remind everybody that there are many different levels of autonomy. So level 1 involves driver-assisted technologies such as adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assistance, automatic braking, some of the things that Eric already talked about. Most of you have probably already used these things. The next level of level 2 automation is where the vehicle is equipped with at least 2 semi-autonomous features that work together. and they work in fixed scenarios. This level is also now becoming quite available in the marketplace. Level 3 autonomy is where both the driving dynamics and the observation of the surroundings are handled by the automatic driving system. The technology is only autonomous under certain conditions, such as a mapped road or a divided highway. A driver has to be there, has to be alert and always ready to take over. The level 4 autonomy is where the driver is not necessary at all. The limitation of level 4 that differentiates it from level 5 is that level 4, the vehicle has to be in an area, a geographic area that has been mapped and that the software is programmed to operate in. Level 5 is that 100% full autonomy. You have a vehicle that can go anywhere at any time under any circumstances, whether or not it's been mapped for that vehicle. So those are kind of the levels we're talking about. Next slide. In my presentation today, I'm going to first address the question of how the development of autonomous vehicles is influencing the planning efforts at Valley Metro. And then I'm going to touch on what Valley Metro is doing to prepare for this technology, and I'll hit on the topic of infrastructure and its intersection with transit. And then I'm going to conclude with a brief summary of the Waymo pilot program that we've actually concluded at this point. So we recognize that autonomous features on vehicles come in many forms, as I just described, and the flashiest and sexiest of them, of course, is that fully self-driving vehicle. How many people have ridden in one? Hannah has, I know. Yeah, a lot of us have. Okay. But we recognize that there are many levels prior to that are available to us now. We don't know when the fully autonomous vehicles are going to be here. In addition to the cars that are being developed, the transit industry is out there working on a fully autonomous, full-size bus. So those are coming too, and I think the trucks are already out there. The delivery trucks are already out there. So buses would be similar. We'll just be delivering people instead of boxes. Yeah. No, you're good. Okay. But we don't know when that's happening. We recognize that autonomy does not have to mean driverless, and so we're also looking at other forms of autonomy that could be helpful to us, such as the lane keeping, the auto braking, the lane assistant. And we're looking at these in the closer term, what they can bring to transit and how we can benefit from them. There's so many things out there that we need to evaluate, and it's easy to talk about the sexy driverless vehicle, but there are many things in between. We need to evaluate what's the cost of them, what's the benefit of them, and are they things that we should be investing in, or are they not? They're not quite ready yet, but they will be in the future. These are all things we have to work through. Autonomous trains, of course, are already here. Trains are actually easier than rubber-tired vehicles to automate. When that vehicle's on a fixed guideway, you only have to worry kind of about when it starts and stops and how it interacts with its environment, if there's pedestrians and other traffic. And if you're in a situation where you can actually take away the pedestrians and the other traffic and run a train on a fixed guideway, you've got the Phoenix SkyTrain, right? It's out there. And on this slide, what are we? I think we're too. Oh no, I did it. Okay. No, I think we're too far. Too far forward. Too far forward. We should be on. It should be first mile, last mile. Right there. Okay. Thank you. So I did put first mile, last mile, and microtransit on here. Not because autonomous vehicles are in transit are always used in first mile, last mile, or because microtransit always means autonomous vehicles. Sometimes we get people talk about those in the same sentence as if they are one and the same. They are not one and the same. Microtransit is a mode for service delivery, and autonomy is a technology for the operation of the vehicle. But I do see that there's a lot of potential in the natural intersection of these two things. So as we see autonomy enter the world of transit, this is very likely to be where it happens first. Now I'll go to the next slide. So So how are we getting ready for the integration of AVs, autonomous vehicles, in the transit landscape? A likely, as I just said, a likely early scenario is the intersection of on-demand services and autonomous technology. We can see a growing role for transportation network companies, the TNCs, in the world, in the transit family. Those are the Ubers and Lyfts of the world. There are services that we are providing or would like to provide that might be better suited to on-demand service with smaller vehicles. Some of our services for people with disabilities today fall into this category. We've been using a TNC as one of our Ridechoice program providers for some time now. And I'll get into that a little bit more later, what the Ridechoice program is. In brief, it's an on-demand service that Valley Metro offers for people with disabilities. Services very similar to what we're already providing for people with disabilities are also what it looks like when we start to address some of the less densely populated areas and serving them with microtransit and on-demand services. So the thought of merging these two very similar services together provides some really interesting opportunities. I also see a potential for bus and van operators to become something more like customer service ambassadors. And I got a disclaimer, I am not speaking for Valley Metro here. I don't want anybody to call our drivers union. This is me talking, okay? I don't really see us sending a 40-foot bus down the street completely unattended to be picking up high school kids and little old ladies at the same time. With absolutely no supervision there, I don't think that's going to be the case. But imagine if our employee who's now driving that bus could instead devote 100% of his or her attention to interacting with the customers, to answering questions, to curbing unruly behavior, to making sure that bus is clean or seeing if it has an issue that it needs maintenance or some extra cleaning. The result of that would be a significantly enhanced customer experience. And that's what I think we really need to focus on. The opportunity here is to improve customer service. I picture those orange shirts in downtown Phoenix being our bus drivers, right? I just think that would be cool. Next slide. So I want to turn just for a moment to infrastructure and where we think that's going. AVs will certainly affect the service that we deliver, but there's also implications for the infrastructure supporting our services and the need for what's out there. AVs are going to open up and elevate questions about roads and lane infrastructure. We're going to have to look at the need for dedicated transit lanes or the reduced need for dedicated transit lanes, not sure which way that might go. Establishing designated pickups and drop-off locations. We might see that the demand for park and ride lots goes down significantly. We might see that there is a new need for staging locations as these vehicles might not be actively working all of the time. AV also opens up or elevates questions about ITS and how it interacts. ITS is clearly a crossover between transit and vehicle traffic in general, including such things as communication between vehicles, interaction with traffic management systems, and technology that will enhance traffic flow, and Eric hit on a lot of that stuff. These are all things that are already being tested in their own right, and they are not typically in the transit authority's purview. But addressing these things is going to absolutely impact the way we implement autonomous vehicles in the transit industry. Next. So, here's our questions. Yeah, I don't have a lot of answers today. This discussion leads to more questions, and it really points out the fact that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know when level 4 or 5 autonomy is going to become widely available, especially in the transit industry. But we do believe that understanding the questions is the beginning of answering the questions. Valley Metro has begun exploring these questions, and we intend to continue this exploration. Some of the questions that I've put on the slide here: will we see increased car and trip sharing, reducing congestion, or will we see congestion go up because there's more vehicle miles traveled? We don't know what that's going to look like. as the world's safest drivers, which is what Waymo likes to call their vehicle. They're developing the world's safest driver. Will these vehicles be able to travel more closely together with that ITS component in there? Who will own these vehicles, and how might this change the way we own vehicles? Might we own a part of a vehicle instead of a whole vehicle, sort of a vehicle timeshare, so to speak? And here's just another thought. There's been a lot of push toward electric vehicles. Because the autonomous vehicles are essentially always electric, it might be that they feed off of each other and the acceptance of electric vehicles is accelerated that much more just because of the autonomous vehicles being electric. But what we do know at Valley Metro is that we want to be part of the dialogue. So to that point, next slide, we did an AV project. We've recently completed an autonomous vehicle project that we did in partnership with Waymo and with Arizona State University. There is a report out there that's completed at this time. You can go to the next slide. If you want to find it, and you can't, just go to the FTA website, and it is report 0198. If you can't find it, let me know. So as a part of an FTA Mobility On-Demand Sandbox grant award that was originally from Mobile Fare and Transit Information Systems, Valley Metro was awarded a bonus on that grant. It was $250,000 to do an AV demo. Waymo became our partner supplying the autonomous vehicles, and the grant money, that $250,000, could only be used for data collection and research. So think about that. We're a transit agency, we run vehicles, and we can't use this money to run vehicles. It's a bit of a dilemma for us. So enter the Ridechoice program. Ridechoice is a subsidized, on-demand, alternative service for ADA paratransit certified people with disabilities and for seniors age 65 and above who reside in participating communities. It has access to a large network of rideshare transportation providers, including Uber, taxi cabs, and other wheelchair accessible vehicle providers. Customers just call a single number to request a ride at any time, day or night, any day of the year. They can book the trip with the service provider of their choice, and the cost of that is $3 from the customer. The rest is subsidized. That's for the first 8 miles. Any additional mileage, the customer pays for that. Because the Ridechoice program already existed and its operating costs were already part of our budget, Ridechoice became a natural fit for the AV demonstration. So we simply made Waymo one of the Ridechoice service providers in that program. Next slide. Program was limited, of course, to the Ridechoice trips that were made within the Waymo service area. We didn't control the Waymo service area. Shown here on the map, it's generally bounded by State Route 60 on the north, Santan portion of the 202 on the south, I-10 on the west, and Highway 87 Arizona Avenue on the east. It also included this chunk down here to the south, down into Chandler. We were able to connect with the Chandler Park and Ride. We were unfortunately not able to connect with Light Rail Transit. We kept asking them for that, and they just kept not doing it, but they don't do what we say. Participants in the program came from our existing pool of Ridechoice users who were traveling within the Waymo service area, and the pricing structure was the same. They paid $3 for their trip. Next slide. We structured the research around what we wanted to learn. Our focus was on how this new technology might enhance the customer experience and satisfaction, how it might meet mobility and accessible needs of transportation disadvantaged populations, and how it might actually improve safety, or how people might feel about their perceptions of the safety. Next slide. We saw this demonstration as a first step in understanding how autonomous technology might integrate with the existing transit system. We wanted to know how people would react to this technology. That was really our first kind of toe into the water. How is the general public gonna feel about this? We were looking at first mile, last mile solutions for connectivity to the transit system, and we wanted to see how the technology itself would respond to various traffic environments. What difficulties might we learn about that we don't know about now in terms of picking people up, dropping people off. Next slide. So there were 72 people who initially showed an interest in this program. And for the purpose of this demonstration, and the research participants had to meet the following criteria. They had to be Ridechoice users who did not need a wheelchair in order to access the vehicle. That was just the reality of using Waymo. They are completely committed to accessibility, but that's just not something that they have solved yet. They're more focused on the autonomy at this point. Users had to have a smartphone, and they had to be willing to share data about their travel, and they had to be willing to fill out a survey periodically about their experience. Next slide. In addition to surveying the participants regularly, and all that data is in the report, I'm not going to go over it. ASU also conducted focus groups of the participants, and we also had a focus group of subject matter experts that translates into basically the city transit staff members who got together. Takeaways from those focus groups were, and this is the super short list, the long list is in the report, riders enjoyed the service. Waymo gave a sense of safety and independence to people who were using it. The riders indicated an eagerness to use the service, and that may wear off over time. I mean, it's the sexy thing out there, right? The subject matter experts believe that there's potential to enhance transit in the region, and the subject matter experts also identified the potential to provide service to underserved transit markets. Next slide. Okay, next. We're on the next slide. Yes, please. It's not going. Oh, well, I'll just keep going. There's a lengthy report, largely written by ASU and published by FTA, so you can find that out there on the internet. This slide, next slide, this slide, is a really short list of the takeaways from the research. Participants liked using Waymo, and they wanted Waymo to stay as part of the Ridechoice options. Whenever they could, they chose Waymo over all the other providers. Participants generally embraced self-driving service delivery. There was some hesitation in sharing rides with strangers. That goes back to, I don't think we're going to be sending that bus down the road with no attendance at all. And the pandemic did affect the project. We had to actually cut the project a little bit short because of the pandemic. Next slide, last slide. Policymakers, yay. In addition to the focus groups, ASU also conducted a roundtable of our policymakers. Those are elected officials, board members, city managers were in that group. And what we learned from them, the very short list, is that there is a desire to do more demonstration projects, and they recognize the need for regional coordination in all of this. Next slide. So what's next for Valley Metro? We are currently developing a request for proposals for a new demonstration project to continue in our quest for information. We're going to focus on first mile, last mile solutions and on microtransit. And we look forward to sharing those results with you when they're available, which will be a while. And next slide just says questions. I'll be happy to answer questions. And if we do have some video later, I think we're going to do if we have time. We won't do it right now. That's what I have for you today.
Thank you, Carol. And next up, we have April Wire from McDOT. Virtually.
Good afternoon, guys. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So I work for Maricopa County Department of Transportation. I'm the Arterial Operations Program Manager, and I oversee the Traffic Management Center, day-to-day operations, and then new and emerging technologies implementation. So today we're just going to talk about some of the experiences that McDOT has had with implementing new and emerging technologies. I think we've heard from others, honestly, we don't know really what's coming. And so McDOT has tried to make a very strong effort to stay on top of it and get our feet wet in a sense, because as we implement technology, we realize that it's very challenging. Transportation is one of those spaces that most of the time when you're designing a roadway or anything like that, we have guidance materials that have been around for a very long time. But when it comes to transportation technologies, it's a new space for us. There's not a whole lot of standards. There's nothing to really guide us as far as best practices in a sense, right? We're all learning together nationwide as we implement some of these technologies on our roadways. So, next slide, please. So today I'm just going to go over a little bit of background about Maricopa County, the Aztec Regional Partnership, how that got started, our Connected Vehicle Smart Drive program in Anthem, Arizona, smarter work zones initiatives that we're working on and future plans for us. Next slide. We'll go ahead and get started with the background about Maricopa County and the Aztec Regional Partnership. Next slide. So just pure facts, if you're not aware, I think most of us are from this region. Maricopa County is the 4th largest county by population of about 4.2 million people. We encompass 9,200 square miles. We have 27 cities and towns in our county boundaries, and we are larger than some states. So we continue to be the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing counties in the U.S., and we don't see that slowing down anytime soon, which means more people to our region, more vehicles on our roadway, and as some of the presenters have already talked about, we're getting to the point where we can't build our way out of these congested areas. There's not enough right-of-way, not enough width of our existing facilities as far as road lanes and whatnot. So we're trying to use technology to pretty much maximize the space that we have and try and prolong its effectiveness as long as we can. Next slide. And so the Aztec Regional Partnership has been around since 1996. It started as a model deployment through an federal highway initiative. It was sponsored in the beginning. I think a lot of partner agencies kind of joined because there were some dollars at play, but as time has gone on, the model deployment ended in 2000, but the partnership continues to be very successful. I think it's partly because we've built these foundational relationships. Our peers have like-minded settings as far as thought process. They have people to back each other up. We can go forward and propose very thoughtful projects on large level grant projects for implementing ITS solutions and traffic management and operations solutions as we move forward as a region instead of working in silos from city to city. So in the Aztec Regional Partnership, we do have 24 partner agencies involved. It includes 15 cities and towns, the Federal Highway Administration, MAG or MPO, Eric that just talked, our state DOT, ADOT, public safety, and also the universities in transit as well. Those university research partnerships are very valuable to us as they can provide a lot of expertise and deep dive into some of the data analytics that we're not able to do on our own. Next slide. So let's get into the Connected Vehicle Smart Drive program that we oversee here at MCDOT in collaboration with ADOT. And so, next slide. So in our Anthem test bed, we are really testing connected vehicle technology, and the gist is traditionally there's a device in the vehicle that is communicating with our infrastructure that's on the roadway. It's usually a radio at this point. It's broadcasting out basic safety messages that tell roadway conditions so that drivers can make very educated decisions. So if they see that traffic is slowing down ahead, then they can turn off and go down a parallel route. And in our region, that is strongly possible because we have a very, very good grid network of roadways where it's very easy to go on a parallel road if you see your main road is blocked. Next slide. So we've been working in Anthem for a very long time. It's a live test bed, and it has been one of the very first nationally recognized connected vehicle test beds. We work in partnership with ADOT and the University of Arizona to advance the development and deployment of MITS. MITS stands for Multimodal Intelligent Traffic Signal System. It's really testing emergency vehicle priority and giving it a thoughtful process as far as where the emergency vehicles are approaching from, who should be serviced next, and letting those emergency vehicle operators know that they are going to get a green next and actually know that their location was received through our system and process. We work in collaboration also with Palo Alto. They have a parallel partnership deployment through the University of Berkeley, conducting the same kind of research that we're doing in our Anthem testbed, but a little bit different applications, but still working on emergency vehicle prioritization. So in our testbed, we have 11 signalized intersections equipped with dedicated short-range communications technology, and we are anticipating bringing on the 6 freeway interchanges in the near future. In Anthem, there are 25,000 residents and 10,000 vehicles, so we work very closely with that community for them to be very educated on what's going on out there. We've advanced very aggressively through there with the research staff that we have through University of Arizona, and it's been pretty successful. It's definitely let us get our feet wet as far as how do we implement this technology, what are the challenges. We like to do smaller scale pilots so that in the future we can scale these very aggressively and very quickly as the technology advances. Next slide. And so some of the successful outcomes of the Anthem testbed pilot has been the MITS pedestrian application. So one of the research students at University of Arizona that was working in this environment developed a pedestrian application, and they have gone on to work for a private vendor in terms of this to put a off-the-shelf solution that their agencies can buy. So I say that as a success because that's the ultimate goal, is taking it from a research phase into an actual real life deployment stage that is very useful for people, can be bought and off the shelf, and not a whole lot of development has to be put into it. So essentially what this does is it's the application that you download on your phone. You push the button and it's as if you had hit the button at the actual signal itself. So it'll read off the countdown for you, tell you when it's your turn to cross. And also it has a tactile component where it shakes if you're outside of the boundaries of the crosswalk. So GPS, it works off of GPS, but a very smart GPS. It's very microscopic instead of macroscopic. So it keeps you in line with where that crosswalk is. Next slide. And so as we've grown our Anthem testbed in research and connected vehicle technology, we've taken those components and applied them to other projects. So up the pipeline, we have the Intelligent Transit and Freight Signal Priority Project. The gist of this is that we're working in partnership with City of Tempe, Mesa, and Phoenix, and the ASU Transit to provide connected vehicle transit and freight priority at traffic signals. Focusing on ASU's transit routes, they have a bus that goes in between the campuses on a daily basis. I think it's every hour or something like that. And so we're working in partnership with ASU to help provide that route and those transit vehicles that operate on that route with connected vehicle technology, and so that if they're behind schedule, they can get green lights through the route as they try and catch up on time. For the freight portion of it, we're planning on deploying connected vehicle technology on MC85 and working in partnership with Swift Trucking to give them kind of the same technology of prioritizing freight down corridors. Next slide. So growing off of that, right now we're in the process of Loop 101 mobility project, and so the ultimate goal of that project is having a decision support system that's created for incident management. So if there is a freeway closure and traffic is detouring onto the arterial roadways, we wanted a system that can help deliver those relief plans, adjust the signal timing, automatically deploy messages onto the variable message signs that are on the freeway system to tell people where to go. Other aspects of it is a connected vehicle deployment in Scottsdale that's growing off of the work that we've done in Anthem. So we're planning on equipping about 50 traffic signals in Scottsdale with this connected vehicle technology, and also supplying their transit, I think it's their trolley vehicles, with this technology so that they can have priority down their corridors as well. Hopefully in the sense of, when The ultimate is when there is a closure on the Loop 101, people get out of their cars and go into transit. It's a, very futuristic idea, but we wanted to test the connected vehicle applications related to that and deploy it in relation to that project. Next slide. And so another aspect of the Loop 101 mobility project is this traveler information application. And so again, it's a mobile application where drivers can be very knowledgeable of what's going on the freeway system and the parallel arterial roads so that it can be in real time to them. I know there's other applications right now out there. Our goal is not to, have a very robust application, but be able to push this data to our third-party providers so that the reach of this information is timely, real-time, and further than what we know as a public agency can provide. Next slide. So we'll talk about a little bit next about our Smarter Work Zone initiative. This is a space where I think it's starting to grow a little bit more. We realize that there's a lot of challenges when it comes to connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and just regular drivers traversing through work zones. It's ever changing and unpredictable all at the same time. Some of them are very long, so we wanted to provide our roadway users with very real-time information. Next slide. So the Aztec Regional Partnership has been very instrumental in establishing the regional archive data system. And essentially it's housing all of our data in the region related to transportation, incidents on our roadways, 911 feeds and whatnot. So we have very robust system of data that's coming through our system for processing. We've been collecting this data for about 25 years now, and many regions strive to have this framework in place, and we are very lucky as a region to be one step up on that. We have very robust data sets, and we're working very aggressively on turning that data into information. Next slide. So this slide shows our data inputs and our data outputs. So you'll see in the blue box on the left that we have a lot of different data sets coming in that RADS is housing. So we have anything from the 911 feeds to the video camera feeds coming in there. And then we have our engines in the middle that process that data. And then in the green box is our outputs. And so RADS is responsible for displaying the travel time information on the DMS signs on the roadways. We used to have displays at our car rental facilities by the airport to display travel times. From the airport to the west side, or the airport to the east side, or wherever the case may be. We have to remember that some of these were developed way before Google was ever involved, or like smartphones were a real thing. So people did look at those very highly. So they're from the early 2000s. We also have other ways of pushing data to our AZ511 system for traveler information. Next slide. And so alongside AZ511, that's available on the public side, we do have an interface called ARIS, Aztec Regional Information System, that does display the very similar information, a little bit more granular for our traffic management center. Next slide. And so as we talk about supplying more work zone data in real time, I talk about those data sites because what we're trying to do is push this work zone data into RADS and have more real time data as far as what's going on in the work zone. Because if you, on the construction side, you get a lot of permits, and some of those permits, the work itself may only be 30 minutes, but the permit duration is usually about 30-day window, and that 30 minutes worth of work can happen anytime in that 30-minute window, and we really don't have a very good grasp on when that's going to happen because it's dictated by the contractor that put in that permit. And so what we're trying to do is narrow in that range and have it more in real time. And so we've highlighted some different projects as far as supplying that data and working with devices that are able to produce that data. Next slide. So with our pilots, we worked with providing smarter work zone technologies, connected vehicle devices within the work zone, and also developing a framework for that data to be displayed, the format of it and whatnot. And so we worked on a lot of these as national initiatives, working with our Federal Highway Administration and USDOT to streamline these processes. But again, it's still kind of in a development phase. We've tested the concept and working towards the scalability of it. Next slide. And so this diagram just kind of displays how it worked. We work in this particular setting. We work with Ridechoice and Swift to get that information, the real-time information into the freight vehicles, and then how the data is processed through RADs, pushed to the radio, and then pushed into the vehicles. Next slide. So this one displays what the actual freight drivers saw in their vehicles as these messages are broadcasted out in real time. So it just gave them a heads up on, there's work zone in the next 3 miles, and here's the travel time through the work zone so that they can make educated decisions as far as, should I go around it? Is there a better way for me to go, or should I just drive through the work zone because the delay is not that bad? Next slide. And so as we implemented solutions like this or new emerging technologies, we run into a lot of challenges. Basic ones as far as like providing power to mobile infrastructure like this. This is a trailer that housed our connected vehicle processor. So you can see there's a lot of solar panels and then the box that housed the actual processor itself. In this situation, it was on MC85, not the best area, so we had issues with things like the battery being stolen all the time, and then the power draw from different devices being too much for solar panels to handle, or the size of your actual car batteries that we had in there to actually store. So different challenges like that, but we don't really know what we're going to encumber until we start with deployments like these. So that's why we like doing a lot of pilot projects. Next slide. So this is what the inside of that enclosure looked like. We had a signal controller in there is what that blue box is. It houses a connected vehicle co-processor unit that actually is working with a connected vehicle radio that's installed at that intersection to pull in a lot of different things that we weren't anticipating that were very challenging as far as the power coming in, the heat of it because it's in summer, providing cellular reception to this thing so we can actually get real-time data from this. Next slide. And so we'll talk about our future plans a little bit. Next slide. So we always go through this process of testing different equipment, piloting it, and figuring out how to scale it. And as we do this, we're running into challenges that we've never seen before, because as far as hiring people and having the right individuals to do the work, that's always a challenge for us. We're transitioning from, in transportation, having your typical civil engineering person to hiring more data scientists to process data that we have a plethora of, and sometimes we don't know what to do with all that data, and we want it to be turned into information that's very actionable. So that's always challenging for us. Next slide. So as we cross from research and the pilot phases into all these other phases listed here on this little diagram, our ultimate goal is to get to operations and maintenance. Next slide. And so that is a real challenge for us to get to that point. Technology changes very quickly. So a clear example is our cell phone. Every 2 years we get a new cell phone. We are not used to these technologies having such a short lifespan as far as transportation technologies, right? Because our roadway, it's there forever. These technologies die maybe every 2 years or something like that. So our practices as far as maintenance, operations is definitely changing. Our skill set is definitely changing. Our needs are definitely changing. So it's all things that we know we need to be on the lookout for in the future and plan for very accordingly. But it is a very unique and unusual space for us right now, but it is looking pretty promising moving forward. And just other things that we've experienced is when I first came to, I've been in Arizona for the last 5 years, and about 5 years ago, you would hear at every single conference people talking about connecting them with autonomous vehicles and how it was going to be here in the next like 5 to 10 years. Well, it's been about 5 years, and we anticipated this huge growth of the deployment of autonomous vehicles, but the reality of it is that it's probably a little bit more delayed than everyone anticipated, but now we're seeing a rise in the electrification of vehicles, and that being a big push, and more research needs to be done on that to see how that influences our work moving forward in the transportation field. Next slide. And so, are there any questions? Is it time to take questions?
Thanks, April. We're just going to wait for Anita to move into the question and answer portion. Just so you know, you are fully displayed on the screen in the room. Even though we can't see them, they can see us. So Jamie, April, Anita, whenever you're ready for Q&A.
Well, that's a good introduction. Thank you so much, April, for your presentation. If anyone would like to ask a question to any of our panelists, now would be a good time.
Use the handheld microphone up there.
Yeah, April Chevette will bring a microphone to you. Paul?
Testing. Okay, good. All right.
Question for Eric. The new MAD proposition funds, will any of those be used for the I-11 corridor?
No, not at all. No, we have no money program for I-11 at all. I tell people I-11 is really an important statewide project, no doubt, but from a regional perspective, it just isn't high enough priority for the region to fund regional taxes.
Excellent, thanks, Eric. Can I ask another question?
Of course.
The mic is mine.
Go ahead.
Carol, a question for you. I think I know the answer, but I'd like to know the truth. You mentioned that.
I may not tell you the truth.
You mentioned that with the Waymo work, there was no connection to light rail, and I'm curious why that was.
Oh, that is simply a function of where Waymo has mapped its area. I don't know if anybody's seen them. They're running around downtown Phoenix right now. They're everywhere in downtown Phoenix. But they won't operate in an area where they have not thoroughly mapped and tested and done lots and lots of burn-in miles, so to speak. So it's not that they won't, it's that they haven't yet.
Tables full of smarty plants. My question is for anyone on the panel, just in regards to any level of autonomy, how have you taken into consideration weather? So I have family in Texas, and when it snows in Dallas, it's pileups, right? Here we're having more challenges with dust and wind, flooding, and even in some of the regional areas, fires. And so I'm just really curious of how you've taken that into consideration for planning.
It's a great question, and it is a real problem. It's hard for us to test snow here in Phoenix, but they are doing it up in Minnesota. They're testing, they're trying to figure that out. It is one of many problems that have not yet been solved, but it's definitely being worked on. It's a thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there anyone else on the panel that would like to address that? I know, April, can you hear us?
I can hear
Okay.
you, but it's very faint.
Oh, okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
Anita, this is Haley. I actually did get a question from somebody who had to step away, and this is for MAG, so Eric. How is cybersecurity planning happening in conjunction with the development and deployment of transportation ITS solutions? More and more of our data is collected and exposed to vulnerability risks. How is MAG planning for risk mitigation?
Well, that's a $64 question. And in fact, in working with our technology providers, cybersecurity is an extremely important aspect of that, and I can't give you any more specific answer than that at this point in time. From an infrastructure perspective, our infrastructure is really agnostic relative to technology, and so we do operate a fiber ring here in the valley that MAG built a number of years ago that connects all of our member agencies, and that's what a lot of the 911 volume runs on also, and also supports special events. And so we're plugged into the national cyber threat, I forget what they call that, but so we're plugged into a lot of the national efforts to thwart some of those cyber risks in the future too. But specific technologies, we're not really into that specific aspect.
All right, I think there's a question back here too.
This may be out of left field, but does any of the panel members care if their cars are fueled with hydrogen cells or electric?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. One of the we've been tracking electrification of the fleet. I think is going to happen fairly, perhaps more quickly than many people think. The price point for electric vehicles is expected to be on par with fossil fuel vehicles here. Actually, originally it was supposed to be next year. I think it's probably next couple years or so, combined with better battery technology and greater range. The Lucid Motors Air vehicle, which is a high-end electric vehicle being produced in Casa Grande, has a 500+ mile range, and so I think we're going to see some of the range anxiety. I don't want to be caught out in the middle of nowhere when my battery dies. So I think those factors are happening. Hydrogen, I think, is trickier because you actually have to produce the fuel too, and I think the Nikolai trucking, that's what they were envisioning doing, and some of the fueling stations are actually geographically fairly large too, and so I think there's just some real practical issues that need to be addressed on hydrogen fuels that perhaps electrification doesn't have, and so electrification is probably going to be here sooner than hydrogen fuel cell vehicles on a large scale, in my opinion.
I can tell you that both are being explored and tested in terms of big buses. A conversation with the group that's trying to develop the autonomous bus. One of the things they told us is, and I don't know how this translates to hydrogen, but they said it must be an electric bus because the electrical systems are what you need for the autonomous component to be able to react as quickly as it needs to react. They didn't want to try to do that on a diesel-powered bus or a CNG bus. They wanted an electric bus to do that. So I don't know how that translates over to the fuel cells, but. And we are testing electric buses and actually trying to get some grant money to get them. We did, back to the weather thing with the electric buses, one of the tests that we did last summer, we tested electric buses here in the valley in the height of the Phoenix summer on purpose, because we wanted to see if they could not only operate the range we needed them to operate, because we send a bus out, it's out there all day. Can they operate the range we needed and keep the bus reasonably cool? Because that's a consideration for us, for sure.
Well, I recently bought a 2021 automobile, Nissan, and I'm amazed. The only thing it doesn't do is serve coffee.
All right, we have just a minute here, so.
Oh, I think one more question. Okay, sorry.
So to get to that point, I'm just wondering how many of these electrical vehicles will be augmented
with solar? It's probably a stupid question, but in Arizona, I'm thinking plug them in, but I have a van and I have solar on top and I use that most of the time, but if I ever need to, I run my engine to charge my lithium batteries. And I'm just wondering if in Arizona that might be the get around to power up things.
I don't know the answer, but that's a great point.
You've got surfaces so big on
Oh yeah,
these
oh yeah.
buses. Like 5 panels, you got 600 watts in there.
All right, that's all we have time for, but thank you so much for this fascinating conversation and for your presentations. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today at our first in-person luncheon in quite some time. So it's so nice to see everyone. Just a few announcements. We do have our next and last presentation of the year on November 4th. And that will be here at the University Club, but it'll be outside. And so it's an evening, it's an evening presentation. We have a panel from ADOT talking about the Broadway curve. And so it should be a really nice networking opportunity. There will be hors d'oeuvres and drinks. If I'm forgetting something, April. Okay, we also have our golf tournament in December. That's December 16th, so be sure to get that on your calendars. And we do have 2 golf clinics. One is 1 week from today, which is October 28th. And we have one the following week for November 4th. So November 4th is kind of a busy day, and you're going to have to pick and choose between a golf clinic and the leadership panel, but either one will be great. The registration is limited, though, for the golf clinic. So if you want to go, be sure and sign up. The first clinic will be for absolute beginners. Second one's a little more advanced. So should be good. With that, we do have, hold on one second. And we have just a token of our appreciation, some gift cards. Starbucks. So, in April, we will get one to you, too. But thank you. That concludes the program for today.
Thank you.